Hi guys, time for another video. Sorry I didn't upload anything yesterday, though I doubt many people are watching this because small YouTuber, no one pays attention to this shit. But I have had a few suggestions from a couple friends of mine about what to talk about for my next rant, and so I decided to settle on the French elections. So I'm assuming a lot of you, especially since I'm assuming most people who view my stuff are Americans or someone who speaks English predominantly, because I speak kind of fast and I sound like a fucking lunatic all the time. But France is holding their elections. I believe the first round is on the 26th of April. And it's really come down to 3 or 4 main candidates. You have Francis Fillon, who's a conservative. You have Emmanuel Macron, who is a centrist, who's generally inoffensive and attractive to nobody at the same time. He's kind of a boring candidate, but he's kind of seen as the best bet to win, just kind of because of that. You have Jean-Luc Mélenchon. I can't pronounce his name. It's French, and I was never good at that language. He's a pretty far left character. He's really recently surged in the polls, and it has a chance of reaching the second round because the polls are really tight between the top 4. And then you have Le Pen. And Le Pen is, by my decision, is a total piece of shit woman. She's really been pandering on the fears of the French people following the terrorist attacks that have been going on the last year or so. Her father used to run this party, which is called the National Front. Her father used to run it, and he ended up being expelled from the party for some pretty anti-Semitic remarks, including, I don't think this is exactly the quote, but essentially he said, in response to talking about Jews, throw a whole bunch in the ovens. So that is obviously an abhorrent remark, reprehensible, and he was expelled from the party. And his daughter, Marine Le Pen, has been kind of working to kind of try to mainstream the National Front, but they might have dropped some of the more extremist rhetoric, but the party is still there. The heart and soul of the party is still the same. They're an Islamophobic, far-right party that is just going to be damaging for the French people, in my opinion. Not Nathan Fillion, that's a completely different person. Fillion is, he's the conservative candidate, and he was actually considered for a really long time to be the leading candidate in this field. And then he got caught up in a couple of scandals where it turns out he probably paid his wife and kids thousands of dollars of public money to work for the French government, and that's totally illegal in France. I have some issues with that. It's nepotism. I don't think you should be able to appoint family to positions and pay them. But it turns out they didn't even do the work they were paid for. That's a whole new level of shit. And so he really fell in the polls. He's expected to be disqualified in the first round of voting. And then you have Emmanuel Macron, who's a centrist. He's never held a government position before in his life. He was a banker. He was a minister in the last French government. And he's kind of seen as a totally inoffensive candidate, but he's also very boring. Like, no one's super excited for Emmanuel Macron. But him and Le Pen are kind of neck and neck in the polls. And French elections happen in 2 ways. You have the first round of voting, where if no one gets 50% of the vote, the top 2 candidates go into the second round of voting. And so Emmanuel Macron is expected to reach the second stage, but so are, like I said, other people are close. Fillion, even with all these scandals, is still really close. Jean-Luc Mélenchon is really close. And of course, Le Pen is very close. So of those 4, 2 of them are going to make it to the second round. And regardless of Le Pen's kind of fucking awful policies, she's not expected to win. In the second round, every single candidate, every party, every person beats her in the second round. So even if she makes it to the second round, which she looks like she has a good chance of doing, she will not become the French president, which I am very happy about. But French elections and the French government right now, French politics right now, is a very dangerous place because with all the terrorist attacks that have been going on in France, in Nice, the killing of the priest, the Charlie Hebdo attacks, the shootings at the concert, all these things have been going on. And just again, another police officer was killed in France. So these things are really fueling fear. And people like Marine Le Pen and other conservatives are really targeting the Muslim community, even though there's many Muslims in France. They're not exactly sure how many, because the census doesn't ask religion. It's illegal in France. France is a very secular society. So, but we know there's a large number, because France used to own a number of overseas colonies, specifically Algeria, countries like Algeria specifically. I'm using an example because a lot of Muslims from Algeria have moved to France, and so there's a large Muslim population in France, and a vast majority of these people, they have ferociously condemned these attacks that are happening. They have stood with the rest of France. They have worked with French authorities to get rid of extremists like this. They have combated extremism wherever they can, but it's not enough, because these racist people who don't care that what they're doing, they're playing into the hands of groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other organizations like that. Because what they want to do, they want to drive a wedge between Muslims and non-Muslims. Because if you can separate the two, you can kind of play this narrative to the Muslims. So hey, they don't like you, they hate you, they treat you like you're worse than them, like you're inferior, and they say you're not a real Frenchman, or you're not a real German, or you're not a real Brit, or you're not a real American. And then you do that, these Muslims are isolated, and their own country is telling them, you're not good enough, you're not like us. And so yeah, when groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other people like them come over and say, hey, they don't think you're good enough, why don't you join us? They're gonna join up. That's just human nature. When you feel alienated, you go and find people who are like you, who support you. So these elections, they could have a serious impact on the direction France goes in the next few years. If someone like Jean-Luc Mélenchon or Emmanuel Macron wins, you could see hopefully a minimization of these effects, and maybe working with the Muslims of France to stop organizations like this from spreading. But if, say, someone like Marine Le Pen wins, that's out the window. The attacks are going to get worse. The alienation of French Muslims is going to continue. It's going to intensify. And groups like ISIS are going to continue to gain power, because we don't understand that we're playing into their hands by alienating and attacking Muslims. It doesn't make sense that we go into this, or we do stuff like this. It just doesn't. And I guess I'm a lot less heated about this one. I'm very passionate about stuff like this, but I feel like this is a super important information-based one that I feel like needs to come out in a more calm manner. And the French election is actually something I've been following pretty closely, which is weird because I don't really have any French friends. But France and the upcoming German elections, they're really going to determine the direction the European Union takes over the next years. Because if Le Pen wins, she wants to pull essentially a Brexit for France, a Frexit, I guess. And if it passed, it would be the end of the European Union. Because France and Germany are the two main pillars of the European Union. And if France leaves, it collapses. And it turns into essentially a German-dominated state. And that's what people keep calling it anyways, even though it's not. But if France leaves, that's what it becomes. And a lot of countries are going to start getting a little pissed off about this. These elections, and so pay attention to these guys, because this is going to be important. 26th of April is the first round of voting. If no one wins the majority, which it doesn't look like anyone will, they go into the second round, which happens, I believe, in early May. So pay attention to these elections. They're going to be important. And I hope this has been an informative episode for you guys. So, thanks. Come back next time.